All right. We are live from Occupy City Hall in Rockford, Illinois. This is a section that we call Rockford Reading. We've done with multiple books where we go through and we read a piece of literature, and as we're reading it, we dissect how the information in the piece of literature connects to the things that are going on presently in Rockford, Illinois. And so this Rockford reading session is Why We Can't Wait by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I've read a portion of this already before, so I'm going to pick up where we left off at. Before I get into the reading of this, just want to do a quick little Rockford rundown. And I want to say that earlier today, the May 30th Alliance put up the memorials, along with the members from the community, put up the memorials for the victims of police terrorism, mass incarceration, and racial injustice in the city of Rockford, Illinois. We put those up down here at Say Their Name Square. For anybody who doesn't know, we have put these memorials up over 8 times now, and they have been torn down multiple times by the city of Rockford and by law enforcement agencies. It's important to note that the reason that we are putting these memorials up in the area that we are putting them up is because we want the people in this city to have to confront and to be forced to come face to face with to come face to face with the macro aggressions of police terrorism, mass incarceration, and racial injustice. And so we believe it's important for all of these names and these faces to be seen by the people who frequent this downtown area. Also, when you sue the Rockford Police Department or when you sue the Rockford Police Department for or attempt to sue the Rockford Police Department for some type of wrongful death lawsuit, that lawsuit will go to the city of Rockford. The city of Rockford is culpable for the actions of the Rockford Police Department. And so that is another reason that we are outside of City Hall and that we have these memorials going up outside of City Hall. So I just wanted to note that those memorials went back up, Say Their Name Square again today. And we also added a new memorial for Faustin Guaitigo, who was murdered by the Winnebago County Sheriff deputies on April 10th of 2021. And unfortunately, we are in a situation where we know that these issues will continue to manifest themselves. And so one day we will be here adding a memorial for someone else. And the importance of continuing to have this space here, continuing to have these areas, and so that way people can see when these memorials go up. So that way people can see when these macro aggressions manifest themselves again. And so that way it can be at the forefront of the consciousness of the city. And then also tomorrow will be the 1 year since the May 30th police terrorism attack that took place outside of District 1 in Rockford, Illinois. We will be having a rally at Haskell Park to commemorate that. We invited everybody from the community to please come out. We'll have different people speaking, and we'll have food and some drinks and a few different things going on just to try to, again, keep the issues at the forefront of the consciousness of the city, and to remind people that what has happened in the 12 months since May 30th and what it is that happened on May 30th and why, and the things in the city that led to that. Got a car just like Terry. And the things in the city that led to May 30th taking place. So with all that being said, I want to also say justice for Tyrus Jones, justice for Denzel Duvant, justice for Faustin Guaitigo, and justice for Jose Gonzalez Jr. Okay, I'm going to pick up where we left off at. All right, chat. We're on page 26 of Why We Can't Wait by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Again, this is the Rockford reading, and for anybody who has never watched this before, I'm going to go through and be reading. We outside, y'all, so it's gonna be some noise. We outside. Just gonna be go through and reading this, and then relating how the things mentioned in this book relate to the issues that we're facing in Rockford, Illinois, right now. Under brilliant, and let me know if it's any problems with the audio as we're going along with this too. Under brilliant and dedicated leadership, the NAACP moved relentlessly to win many victories in the courts. The most notable of these established the right of the right of black people to participate in national elections, striking down evasive devices such as the, quote, grandfather clause, end quote, white primaries, and others. Beyond doubt, the doctrine of change through legal recourse reached flood tide into education decisions. Yet the failure of the nation over a decade to implement the majestic implication of these decisions caused the slow ebb of the black people's faith in litigation as the dominant method to achieve their freedom. In their eyes, the doctrine of legal change had become the doctrine of slow token change and, as the sole weapon of struggle, now proved its unsuitability. At the time of this growing realization, during the mid-50s, black people were in the grip of a crisis. Their movement no longer had a promising basic doctrine, a detailed and charted course pointing the way to their freedom. It is an axiom of social change that no revolution can take place without a methodology suited to the circumstances of the period. During the 50s, many voices offered substitutes for the tactic of legal recourse. Some called for a colossal bloodbath to cleanse the nation's ills. To support their advocacy of violence and its incitement, they pointed to an historical tradition reaching back from the American Civil War to Spartacus in Rome. But the black people in the South in 1955, assessing the power of the forces arrayed against them, could not perceive the slightest prospect of victory in this approach. They were unarmed, unorganized, untrained, disunited, and, most important, psychologically and morally unprepared for the deliberate spilling of blood. Although their desperation had prepared them with the courage to die for freedom if necessary, they were not willing to commit themselves to racial suicide with no prospect of victory. Perhaps even more vital in the black people's resistance to violence was the force of their deeply rooted spiritual beliefs. In Montgomery, after a courageous woman, Rosa Parks, had refused to move to the back of the bus and so began the revolt that led to the boycott of the 1955 through 1956, the black people's developing campaign against that city's racial injustice was based in the churches of the community. Throughout the South, for some years prior to Montgomery, the black church had emerged with increasing impact in the civil rights struggle. Black ministers, with the growing awareness that the true witness of a Christian life is the projection of a social gospel, had accepted leadership in the fight for racial justice, had played important roles in a number of NAACP groups, and were making their influence felt throughout the freedom movement. The doctrine they preached was a nonviolent doctrine. It was not a doctrine that made their followers yearn for revenge, but one that called upon them to champion change. It was not a doctrine that asked an eye for an eye, but one that summoned men to seek to open the eyes of blind prejudice. The black people turned their back on force not only because they knew they could not win their freedom through physical force, but also because they believed through physical force they could lose their soul. There were echoes of Marcus Garvey and another solution proffered the black people during this period of crisis and change. The black Muslims, convinced that an interracial society promised nothing but tragedy and frustration for the black people, began to urge a permanent separation of the races. Unlike Garvey's prescription, the Muslims appeared to believe that separation could be achieved in this country without a long sea voyage to Africa, but their message resembled Garvey's in another respect. It won only fractional support from the black community. Most of those to whom the Muslims appealed were, in fact, expressing resentment for the lack of militancy which had long prevailed in the freedom movement. When the black people's fighting spirit soared in the summer of 1963, the appeal of the Muslims declined precipitously. Today, as I travel throughout the country, I am struck by how few American black people, except in a handful of big city ghettos, have even heard of the Muslim movement, much less given allegiance to its pessimistic doctrine. Okay, I want to interject here. So this is one of the places where we talk a lot about you a racist white man. I see what's happening. I'm just gonna ban you real quick. On live. Can I ban him on live? Can I? Oh, block. Yep, block. Doug, you just got banned right on live. It's being right on live. Actually, you know what I should... Doug, no, I'm not even. I don't got time for that. You just got banned right on live, Doug. First person to get banned on live. Okay. Let's keep on going. I was finna interject and say something there, but we just gonna keep on reading. Yet another tactic was offered to black people. They were encouraged to seek unity with the millions of disadvantaged whites of the South whose basic need for social change paralleled his own. Theoretically, this proposal held a measure of logic, for it is undeniable that great masses of Southern whites exist in conditions scarcely better than those which afflict the black people. But the rationale of this theory wilted under the heat of fact. The need for immediate change was more urgently felt and more bitterly realized by the black people than by the exploited white. As individuals, the whites could better their situation without the barrier that society places in front of a man whose racial identification by color is inescapable. Moreover, the underprivileged Southern whites saw the color that separated them from black people more clearly than they saw the circumstances that bound them together in mutual interest. Black people were therefore forced to face the fact that, in the South, they must move without allies. And yet the coiled power of state force made such a prospect appear both futile and quixotic. Fortunately, history does not pose problems without eventually producing solutions. The disenchanted, the disadvantaged, and the disinherited seem, at times of deep crisis, to summon up some sort of genius that enables them to perceive and capture the appropriate weapons to carve out their destiny. Such was the peaceable weapon of nonviolent direct action, which materialized almost overnight to inspire the black people, and was seized in their outstretched hands with a powerful grip. Nonviolent action, the black people saw, was the way to supplement, not replace, the process of change through legal recourse. It was the way to divest themselves of passivity without arraying themselves in vindictive force. Acting in concert with fellow black people to assert themselves as citizens, they would embark on a militant program to demand the rights which were theirs, in the streets, on the buses, in the stores, the parks, and other public facilities. Let me speak on this portion right here. So I think that it's important to point out the manner of nonviolent action that is being spoken of here. I think it's similar to the approach that we similar to the approach that we take as an organization in the May 30th Alliance. And I think that it's important to point out that I think that to just go into nonviolent action and nonviolent direct action and what my opinions and my thoughts and beliefs are on that in some sense of a manner. I believe that within protesting, you have to be able to, if you're going to be able to protest, you have to be able to understand that you have to do something that is impactful. The protest is not a protest if it is not some manner of impactfulness that happens. If it is not polarizing in some manner, if people are not forced to feel something, if people are not forced to their consciousness is not stirred or jarred in some type of a way. And so I think that for us, things like walking in the crosswalk and forcing people who are in the streets in the moment in which people are walking on a crosswalk to see the signs that are out there, to know what people are out there for, and to decide in that moment is how, if you're going to say that you're stopped there for 30 seconds or a minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes, in that time, in that moment, is whatever it is that you're trying to get to, whatever it is you're trying to rush to, how do you weigh that out with the issue that's being presented to you? You know, does this issue being presented to you, does it stop you in your tracks? Does it humble you? Does it make you realize, you know, when you're seeing pictures of people who have been killed, you know, Falson has been murdered. If you were to be driving down the street and say you're in a rush, maybe you're 10 minutes late to work, driving down the street and, you know, maybe you haven't thought about, you know, police terrorism, mass incarceration, racial injustice, you know, you ain't thought about it in a while or something like that. You just, you know, it's not been on your mind. And now you're trying to get to somewhere and you see people walking in a crosswalk with signs of Denzel and his face beat up, pictures of Falston and pictures of Jose Gonzalez. And in that moment, can you realize that whatever it is that you're trying to get to is less important than this issue that's being presented to you, and can you be okay with waiting there until the opportunity presents itself for you to leave? Can you be, or do you, or in that moment, do you decide that you don't care about this issue to that extent, that it's a secondary, it's a third, fourth thing to you, you know, and you want to just get through? And I think that no matter what happens in the moment, you know, and again, it's more diverse emotions and diverse thoughts that people have in these times. But for me, the point is that the direct action forces people to have a their consciousness to be confronted with the issue. And some of this I'm working out the thought as I'm going through and reading this. So excuse me, that was rough. That was a rough dissection. We just gonna keep pushing. Okay. The religious tradition of the black people has shown them that nonviolent resistance of the early Christians had constituted a moral offensive of such overriding power that it shook the Roman Empire. American history had taught them that nonviolence in the form of boycotts and protests had confounded the British monarchy and laid the basis for freeing the colonies from unjust domination. Within this own century, the nonviolent ethic of Mahatma Gandhi and his followers have muzzled the guns of the British Empire in India and freed more than 350 million people from colonialism. Like their predecessors, the black people were willing to risk martyrdom in order to move and stir the social conscience of their community and the nation. Instead of submitting let me go and speak on this sentence. So I think this is an important thing to point out, because a lot of times when we try to communicate to people what it is that we're out here doing, or what the purpose of what we're out here for, and we say to people to raise awareness, to shake people out of lethargy, to awaken the consciousness of the city. A lot of times people try to point us to legislation, or point us to policy, or point us to running for office. And I think this is where just the miseducation and the misinformation of what protests and what demonstrations and what organizing and mobilizing historically has been used for. And right here, they're pointing out to stirring the social conscience of their community. That's not changing the law. That's not changing policies. That's not changing the person who's sitting in office. That's changing the mindset of the society, or the norms of the society. And again, it's not saying that the other thing does not have to be done. Yes, policy has to be changed. Yes, legislation needs to be changed. Yes, different people have to sit in these political seats, in these political offices. But you have to change the climate for that policy to be changed, or else even if you get it changed, it'll never be enacted properly. Look at Brown versus the Board of Education. You have to get the climate change for the new politician that you're going to sit into a seat, or else the new politician is going to be making the same mistakes, is going to be doing the same things as the old politicians, because the climate doesn't dictate that they do something differently. And so that is why it is important for policy change and legislation change and political change to be anchored with a mass movement that changes the consciousness of the city, that changes the thought pattern of the city, that changes the behavior pattern of the city, that changes the ideology of the city, that challenges the bigotry and the racism in the city. So that way, when you put together a community review board, or when you give dash camera or body cameras to police officers and law enforcement, when people see these videos, they're politically educated enough to understand that something has to be done about these wrongdoings. They're informed enough to understand that violence only begets violence, and that these police officers are workers of violence, and that we have to find ways outside of workers of violence to deal with issues of violence, or else we will continuously have a cycle of violence. And so I think that is the difference between what it means to be protesting and what it means to be and to be outside, and what it is to be politicking and be a politician and to be inside. And again, I believe that the climate has to change to dictate the change of the policies and the politicians. But let's get back into this. Instead of submitting to surreptitious cruelty in thousands of dark jail cells and on countless shadow street corners, they will force their oppressor to commit brutality openly, in the light of day, with the rest of the world looking on. And again, that gets us, that's apropos for us to be speaking on May 29th, the day before we get to May 30th, the namesake of this organization, because that is what happened on May 30th. For years, for decades, it was the surreptitious cruelty that people in Winnebago County dealt with in dark jail cells and in shadow street corners that the oppressor committed in secret, that then became committed in the open and in the light on May 30th, while the rest of the world looked on. And it's videos from May 30th that have hundreds of thousands and millions of views. There's videos from Back to Blue that have hundreds of thousands and millions of views, and videos from Occupy City Hall that has thousands upon thousands of views, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of views. And so a lot of these actions that the city of Rockford and Winnebago County have